Mr. Jafarzadeh, I wonder if, in the context of the study that your office has recently put out, you have any thoughts on past presidential elections and whether this year is ultimately any different?
Yes, thank you so much. Definitely, if we look at the history of the presidential elections in Iran, soon after the Iranian Revolution, perhaps less than 2 years after the mullahs came to power, the entire game changed, and it became, instead of the opportunity for the people to vote, which it was the case to a good extent in the early days after the revolution, even though there were a lot of rigging and everything, but at least they would allow in the very first round of the parliamentary elections for the opposition to actually run. But soon afterwards, as soon as they were able to put institutions in power that would vet the candidates, meaning dismissing everyone who was not in allegiance to the system, and that's when the Guardian Council was formed, about a year after the revolution. And with the exception of the very first presidential elections in Iran in 1980, where all candidates were actually allowed to run, there were a total of 124 of them. Actually, there's this table, if you have access to this book, that we put out, the very first presidential elections. There were 124 candidates who registered, and Khomeini himself had said, no problem, we'll allow everyone to run. There were no guardian councils or anything to vet people and dismiss anyone. But what happened when the opposition organizations started to do campaign and holding rallies, drawing huge number of supporters, some as many as 300,000 to the gatherings where, for instance, Mr. Masoud Rajavi, who was a candidate in the first presidential elections, then Khomeini felt that this smells trouble, because a lot of the secular forces like the Kurds, the women organizations, were joining the ranks and endorsing Mr. Rajavi's candidacy, and eventually Khomeini had to intervene himself, and he vetoed the candidacy. The only person that was disqualified in the very first round was Masoud Rajavi, who headed the opposition. And of course, the rest of them pretty much didn't matter that much. And then afterwards, in the ensuing presidential election, the past 12 rounds, the Guardian Council was involved in screening the candidates. Now, over the years, the Supreme Leader has created really a very thick, strong filter that is not just the Guardian Council. There is actually 4 layers of filter for the candidates. The very first layer is the Supreme Leader himself. You cannot make yourself a candidate unless you have the approval of the Supreme Leader. Look at the case of Rouhani himself. He said, he's actually Jahangiri, his deputy, said in April that Rouhani met with the Supreme Leader and asked him if he could run, and Supreme Leader said, Khamenei said, yes, that's okay, it's good for you to be part of it, and then he introduced his candidacy. And look at the case that others who did not get approval of the Supreme Leader, even though they had huge clout and recognition and background, such as Rafsanjani, the two-term president, Ali Akbar Hashemi Rafsanjani, who was became president in 1989 for 2 terms. He's the one who made Supreme Leader Khamenei actually his position. He owes his position to Rafsanjani, one of the 5 top officials in the regime from day one. Yet in 2013, when he filed to register, he was rejected. Why? He said himself in his book, he said on the last day of registration, he wanted to get the consent of Khamenei. He called his office, they wouldn't respond, and he called and called and called, and then the time was running out. There was 15 minutes left. So he actually walked in and registered, and guess what? He was rejected. Why? Because the Supreme Leader didn't want that to happen. The more recent case is Ahmadinejad, the two-time president again, who fell out of favor with Khamenei because of internal friction. He registered this time. Before that, he had met with Khamenei, and he mentioned that, and he asked Khamenei if he could run, and Khamenei said no. And then he started just questioning that, and there were words that, well, it wasn't really exactly a no. He just said, well, I don't suggest. So, and plus it wasn't public. So in one of the speeches, Khamenei, just about a month and a half ago, he said, somebody came to me, and he was referring to Ahmadinejad, and asked me if he should run. And I told him, it's not good for the country for you to run. And then I heard rumors that they said it wasn't a clear rejection, and why I didn't say it publicly. Well, I say it publicly. That's what he said. And nevertheless, Ahmadinejad didn't listen to him, and he went and registered. And guess what? He was rejected by the Guardian Council. So that filter is a very, very serious filter that is just like the 600-pound gorilla in the room when it comes to the filter. That's the key one. And then comes the Guardian Council, which is really a body created by the system just for that purpose. And the Guardian Council doesn't go through the qualifications. The qualifications are very simple. You have to be born in Iran, have the nationality of Iran, be a recognizable person, have the ability to administer the government and be adherent to Islam and the system, which, a large number of people who register, they qualify based on that. Yet it's always like a single digit, like either 4 or 6. It doesn't matter how many people register. You only get like 4 or 6 of them. Look at this chart. It has like the second round of elections, 71 registered, 4 qualified, 46, 4, 53, 79, 2, 128, 4, 238, 4, 817, 10, 1,014, 8, 474, 75, 4, 686, 8, and this time 1,636, 6 only out of that group. So it doesn't matter how many register, it doesn't matter who they are. It's just like they decide, okay, who are the 4 or 6 people who are going to be put on the ballot. That's it. It's it's not a sophisticated thing. And then even when that happens, the third layer is what they call the electoral engineering. I'm not talking about electric engineering. I'm talking about electoral engineering that is run really by the supreme leader and executed by the military, by the Revolutionary Guards and the apparatus that they have created. And their job is to, when there is among the 4 or 6, if there is a favorite candidate, which always there is, so they would try to see how they can stuff the ballot boxes, how they can print ID cards for the dead, how they can, vote as early and as often as they have done in the previous things. But of course, it's a very sophisticated, difficult thing. It's not a slam dunk because the other faction actually sees it. They have a lot of access to a lot of information. So it's a very delicate, sophisticated operation that they have to run. And then the fourth layer, suppose somebody is elected or selected as the president, then it still needs the approval of the supreme leader. He has the power to disqualify or even dismiss a sitting president, let alone a person who has just been approved. So those 4 layers has been really the trend over the past 12 rounds of the so-called elections in Iran.